Thanks very much, Shona. I'm glad you stopped at just describing the exams and not all the frivolities that happened either side of that back in the day. Great. Well, okay, here we go. This is the presentation you've been waiting for all morning. It's the SIP11 presentation on the handling of funds. So I feel there should be some sort of razzmatazz music at this point, but the budget doesn't appear to stretch to that. There we go. That's basically everything that Shona just said. I'm Roddy McKellar. I'm a director with Alvarez and Marsal in Glasgow, and I've been here for about a year now. I've been around Scotland for 20 plus years, KPMG, PwC, Insolvency Committee with ICAS and R3 Technical Committee for Scotland, as Shona said. When I was at PwC, I was the compliance officer for a bit, and I was the head of restructuring technical for a bit. So like all of you, I'm someone who gets excited by SIP11. Yes, and I'm going to run you through a bit about it, why we have the SIP, what it does, why we're having problems with it, and what we can do about it. And spoiler alert, the answer is have some good systems, do a regular review and document it. Everyone loves a file note. It's not rocket science. We here at A&M have to comply with it as much as anyone else. So A&M, in case you haven't come across us, there's thousands of us all over the planet, as the slide shows. But within restructuring, there's a couple of hundred plus in the UK. And so we're a decent size, growing up the country, establishing a new office in Glasgow and then in Edinburgh just last year. So there's the suite of services round about there and sectors that we're involved in, and some of the jobs that you may or may not recognise. The international ones get a lot of press, the layman's, where we were the advisors for the top co in America, FTX, SVB. They're in the press recently. The flag there is the Swiss government on Credit Suisse / UBS. We've got RT Brightbar down in England, and CMS Window Systems. Window Systems, it's not CMS, the very, very impressive law firm, just to be clear, and Ramco up in Aberdeen. So a mix of credentials, but lots of good stuff. As I say, we just opened recently, and the people involved, well, the faces will be probably people that you do recognise. So this is the team in Scotland, and there are many more over above the local people, but we're headed up by Ben Cairns, who's Dunbar-based. He was previously at EY, and he's been here the longest, many years. He's been doing financial services, insolvency, and he's an IP. Kevin and Gillian were at BDO for long periods, and Kevin and Jill have been other places as well before that. Kevin in particular in industry. John Casey, who was at Middlebrooks and previously with KPMG in the Channel Islands in Ireland. Mark Cook, who was with PwC and with Interpath, and Calvin with PwC, and Ben, who was EY. So whilst you want to know who in A&M, what are they talking about, there's lots of people who you will know, and hopefully we do know what we're talking about. We shall find out shortly. We're going to talk about SIP11. And when I said SIP11, when I was speaking to another well-kent face in the Scottish market, Michael Magney, who's now with A&M, heads up our Manchester office. He used to be at Deloitte when he was up here. I said SIP11, and he said cash. And Michael was right, it is cash. It's about the handling of funds. So we had the original SIP back in 2011 to deal with some practices which were hopefully on the way out back then and probably look wild nowadays. The kind of things where there was one big pot of cash, one estate would be used to fund the other estate, robbing Peter to pay Paul. funds going missing, funds not going missing, but maybe going with the IP to Rio de Janeiro or somewhere equally glamorous, and creditors being exposed when banks took action against IPs. So the old SIP looked to draw the line under those kind of behaviours almost, 15 years ago. And then we've got the new SIP to bring up to date with modern practices. The main idea here was to provide greater clarity around the need for proportionate safeguards and financial controls. Keep remembering those words, so that everyone can be confident that funds were held appropriately and securely and everyone's interests were protected. Up on the screen there, you've got the Insolvency Monitor's statistics, and they've talked us through it. And you'll see that there are some very big spikes there. Some of them are very high, showing common areas of problem in reviews when they're out looking at our work. As Stephen said earlier, some of the technical experts from the committee will cover other spikes. If you look at SIP11 cashiering reviews, that's quite a big spike. It's gone from the grey line to the blue one, and so it's gone quite a lot in the wrong direction. And it's on more than half of the reviews that have been carried out. So, you know, it's not just the odd bad egg here doing something completely wrong. This is something fundamentally at least 50% of us are getting wrong. So I spoke to the monitors who prepared this about it, and they were explaining it's not one thing, it's across the board. So it's not just this final report that you get when you do your SIP11 review, the final thing that you produce. It's how you've gone about that review. It's what documents you've looked at as part of your review, and fundamentally the systems behind that process. So there's lots of things across that whole area that they can look at. So that's what we're getting wrong. Why are we getting it wrong? It's maybe less definitive because it's people and it's soft issues, but some thoughts that might be causing that are, this is a relatively new SIP, and relatively is an interesting word here, more about that in a minute. It's wide areas, so when I talked about all those areas they could look at, there's quite a lot of things where problems could arise. We obviously Brexit and COVID, that's standard, it happens everywhere. My own personal view would be that low insolvency numbers for a number of years have maybe resulted in there being fewer people with deep knowledge of how things work and how they should work. So maybe that is causing an impact as well. And some people have suggested, we've moved from ICAS to ICAW monitors, so that'll be a difference. And we asked an ICAS monitor and an ICAW monitor, and they said, and you can see this point, if you ask two different people to review two different things, they will come up with different points no matter what. So yes, there will be a difference because it's different people looking at it, but I don't think that changes the validity of the result. At the end of the day, you know, we can discuss the whys and it's interesting, but it doesn't change that this isn't happening and we need to change. So you're all thinking, very good. You say it's new. How new is it? What I'd like to do would be to give you some clues about when it might happen. And in your head, just in your head, keep it in there. You can think about when this SIP came in. When should you have been doing this stuff since? And as it says, don't phone in just for fun, because there isn't a phone number. So that will make it harder. All the insolvency geeks on the presentation, and given it's a SIP11 presentation, I hope that's all of you, will remember Carillion went bust in the month that this SIP came out. So big liquidation, lots of exciting interest issues for us to talk about. So that's one. Does that make it clear to anyone when it might be? Another hint would be Theresa May. Remember her? She had a cabinet reshuffle, appointing some guy called Rishi Sunak from the backbenches as a minister for the first time. Whatever happened to them? And the then US President Donald Trump caused controversy by calling some countries, let's get that right, some countries holes during a meeting. So unusual controversy from him. So if you put those three together, does everyone know what it is? Well, if you're in any doubt, I've got one that will definitely answer it for you. It's 12 camels were disqualified from the King Abdulaziz Camel Beauty Contest in Saudi Arabia after their owners used Botox on their lips. So I think we can see that will narrow it down very quickly. My colleague Ben Cairns says it's all about the eyelashes and the lips in a camel beauty contest. And I've therefore looked through the internet to find a good picture of a camel. And that, I think we can all agree, is a beautiful camel. So less fun now, more SIP. SIP11 is the same as the old version in England and Wales. The old version was pretty brief, and it just said these things. It said case money should be kept for a case. There should be restrictions on the banks taking enforcement action. Interest from those funds should be paid to that account. Should have the name on the account. So Roddy McKellar as joint administrator of XYZ Limited. All sounds very familiar. And that it shouldn't be possible to set off funds in one account against another account. So things back then, which I would hope everyone was already doing back then anyway, simples. Then the new SIP came out, and it's still the same as the England and Wales version. There's no different controls over Bank of England notes or Bank of Scotland notes. It's all the same up and down the UK. So we'll have none of that chat about what is and is not legal tender. And the lawyers can all jump on the chat and tell me there's no such thing as legal tender when it comes to bank notes. So there's no change in title to the SIP. But what about a change in text? It's bigger. So it's covering off firms' funds, that's the business's money itself, client funds for which there are separate client money rules, and estate funds, and that's the one that we're going to deal with. And the principles are that line up there in just in writing. It's now saying you have to differentiate and segregate. Oh, fine, we were probably doing that anyway. You have to pay interest. Again, it's the segregation point. So proper purposes now. So previously, 2017, improper purposes were okay by the SIP, but now only proper purposes, please. It now needs to be held securely. So if you have a set of drawers beside you with a set of cash inside there in a Tupperware box, please put it somewhere safe, maybe a bank. And finally, and importantly for us, it should be subject to financial controls. So look, this is not dramatic, but it does go into more detail on what financial controls are. Boom, lots of stuff now, so quite a lot bigger. We can talk about any one of these for a long time, but to be honest, 20 minutes is probably enough on SIP11 already. The points there, very quickly, you should be doing things timely, who knows what the actual word is, and that means banking things quickly, dealing with your processes quickly, and making sure your solicitor agents and your property agent, your plant machinery agents, they're doing that as well. Anyone acting for you. Appropriate persons only, please. No inappropriate persons dealing with cash. Supervise them. Change the controls for different sizes of transaction. Have authorization procedures, formal procedures, where it works through stages. Regular reconciliations. A lot of accountants here, we love a reconciliation. periodic risk assessment, and joint authentication when it's joint cases. So if you're a joint liquidator, joint administrator, things to think about. Insurance, should you have insurance of it? It doesn't say you need to, consider it. Proportionate, so changing controls depending on your business. So it might be you're making single big payments which need lots of controls, or you might be getting lots and lots of monthly contributions from debtors, and that needs controls, different controls. So you need to think about, are they proportionate for the business? Documented it, and that's quite important because that's the evidence that's actually happened, and reviewed at least annually. So you'll look at that and you'll think, God, what are we getting pulled up on? Why is this causing a problem? Well, I'll give you a couple of gentle hints about what it might be. So, when I think back to my JIEB years, and as Shona said at the start, it was a very, very, very long time ago. I don't remember there being anything about a SIP11 review back then, and I don't remember having one. I don't remember seeing one at my previous firms. When I was my compliance officer role, I don't remember doing one. There was always lots of controls, and you did hear lots of stories about cash going wrong in the profession. You know, so-and-so had signed checks to himself, to his own suppliers set up in the wrong name, people with logins that are shared, and pre-signed checks and stuff like that. The kind of stuff you might see at clients and you'd go, oh my God. But, you know, we had lots of controls for this, but I don't remember this review. So I was slightly nervous when I went off to ask my A&M colleagues with some sense of trepidation, do we do this review? Because I don't remember anyone doing it. And they said, oh yeah, there's our test. We did it over the summer, done separately by the tech team, and we reported back to our risk management panel. So I was quite relieved at that point. So the idea is you have proper systems. That's, one would hope, a clear area. You should do that. And there's a lot of former auditors in the profession, so they will know setting up systems, checking the work, and documenting that, documenting processes and the controls, making sure that you've got controls that cover all the risks. So risk assessment and controls to cover them. So it's not just do the checks get signed. You've got lots of areas of control that you need to cover to make sure it's comprehensive. Do the annual review, do it annually, and have it. In our business, it's done by a separate technical team, which may not be possible, but there's some independence there. You're not marking your own homework. We have a 100-question document just on the controls part of the SIP. So you think that's quite a lot. But if you go back to the page with all the controls on it, there's 16 blocks there. And if you do a handful of questions on each, you could very quickly get up to a number in that ballpark. So our test takes each one of those blocks and asks a series of questions on it, which produces a detailed summary findings. And then there's a written report that's presented to the risk management panel. So that's showing them that not only do you have controls, but they're actually working like you used to when you did audits for those auditors amongst us. So not only does it exist then, it also has to cover evolving risks. So things that we might recognize, pre-signed checks, don't have them, but you've got controls to cover stuff like fishing, angler fishing, spear fishing, smishing, vishing, swirling, spoofing, whaling, push and pull payments. I may have made one of those up, but I'm not going to tell you which one. Lots of different controls to cover those stuff. If you don't have a review to cover all that stuff, the ICAS webinar that Stephen Wood referred to earlier is good. There's also stuff on the ICAS website, and you may even speak to some of the people at ICAS, David, Stephen, even some of the wonderful technical committee members. Also, a small mention to the ICAW, they have a good financial control sheet on their website. So, almost on time. have good systems, do a regular review and document both well, please. And I will leave you with a picture of our smiling faces at A&M. What more could you want? Shona.